suppose. It's not like a park run or even a marathon. It probably is something of an ultra marathon, and we're heading for a DNF at the moment. It feels like, and we need to up the pace and eat more.
Yeah, eat jam.
Eat jam. Okay, yeah.
Right, hello, welcome to Your Brain on Climate. I'm Dave, your host, and I've just been out for a run, so forgive any slight shortness of breath. Very, very apposite, because this episode on Your Brain on Climate, we are talking to a runner. Now, you may think you're a runner if you pop down to the end of the street, have a run and come back. Maybe even if you do a half marathon, like I did a few days ago. That's not running. What running is what my guest this episode does. Damian Hall runs, and he keeps on running, and he runs some more. And we're going to talk about endurance, this phenomenal superpower that he has got to run up mountains and keep on running up mountains for miles and miles and miles. I got fascinated thinking about what goes on in the brains of people who endure, as in like physically endure stuff, for days. The sort of runs that Damian does take him for days at a time. He holds the world record for a race over 268 miles worth of mountain. Is an extraordinary bloke. He's also a climate activist and he knows loads of stuff about saving the planet. So I thought it'd be great to chat about what happens in his head. How does he keep going? How does he keep going up them mountains? What makes him put one foot in front of the other and keep on going, despite what I presume is some quite staggering amount of knackeredness? And this is the important bit, is it something we can learn? Because we probably all need, given the state of everything, a little bit of doggedness and the ability to, metaphorically speaking, as Kate Bush would have said, run up that hill. As always, if you hear this noise, it denotes wisdom, or a reference, but probably some wisdom, probably off of Damian, probably in reference to something that he has done. So have a little look in the show notes and you'll find out more about it. You don't have to stop the episode that way, you can just carry on. And if you like the show, please consider chucking in a couple of quid, like my wonderful small army of people do on Patreon. I pay my guests. It's really important to me. It means it values their time. It means I can get great guests. I can't do that without your support. So please do go to wobbly.patreon.com/yourbrainonclimate and chip in. And if you can't or won't do that, then at least please go and leave me a review on your podcast medium of choice. 5 stars would be fab, and write something with your hands. Oh, I love this episode. I love Damian so much. It is really rare to meet someone who is a bit of an idol. I've been following Damian for ages, before actually I knew really much about his climate activism, to which I think he's come relatively recently. And he's just the loveliest guy, humble as you like, as these kind of ultra runners are, but really someone that I found so inspiring. So look, without any further ado, we'll get on with it. And the first thing I asked him really was to put into context for the mere mortals such as me, and perhaps you, exactly how far he does run and, you know, why.
Your brain on climate.
There's a bit at the start of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy where Douglas Adams says, you may think it's a long way to the shops, but that's just peanuts to space. And I think if I introduce you as a runner, that doesn't quite do justice to what you do. So you run a really, really long way, right?
Well, I think I'm in safe hands if I'm chatting to a Douglas Adams fan. I suppose so. It's just become kind of normal. In fact, my kids, I've got 2 kids, they're 9 and 12, and during the lockdown, which is, it is kind of 2.5 years ago now, my wife who's not a mad enthusiastic runner, but does run a little bit for health. She ran a lockdown marathon, and we did try and celebrate that as much as possible, and I was impressed. But my kids were just like, well, you only ran 26 miles, Mum. And that was really unfair on her, I think.
Speaking of someone for whom the idea of ever doing a marathon, I run half marathons, but the idea of doing a marathon, if I ever did that, I'm taking a month off work. I expect to be carried shoulder high around the block. Yes, because you go further than a marathon.
Well, the sort of the definition of ultramarathons in a way doesn't do it justice, but it's kind of any distance above the marathon. But it really can be, we have 30k races, 50k, 100-mile races are quite a sort of genre, quite a popular kind of distance, nice big round number. But they go much further than that too. I've sort of got into a bit of a habit of 200-mile races, but normally they're not 200 miles, they're like 260 miles. And
well, I mean, it would be, why not round it up?
Well, technically that one I'm referring to is 268 miles. So you can get a bit carried away. And of course, you can do your own challenges. You don't have to do it as part of an event. You can just pick a distance. And people do run around the world or run across Australia or run across America. I mean, I can appreciate to some people that just sounds a bit bonkers. What you've got to remember is when we say run, we don't run all of it. There's definitely hiking breaks, whether that's the terrain or just, actually, I'm a bit pooped. I'm going to walk for 10 minutes or an hour. There's a lot of snacking. In fact, the best runners are the best eaters. It's amazing what you discover how, and I can still remember I had a flashback just then to the first conversation I had. I was a journalist and I was going to do my first ultramarathon, and I interviewed another ultramarathon runner, and he kind of said, it's amazing. You just go a bit slower than your marathon pace and just keep eating, and you can just go and go and go. And he said he'd done like 10 100-mile races. And I was just like, I guess I was a little bit in your position thinking, what, A, why? And B, there's no way I'm going to end up doing that. Like, why would you and that's exactly what I've ended up doing. So, come join me, Dave. Come on over.
One day I will join you. Let me see if I can get around the half marathon I'm doing on Sunday without shitting myself first. That would be the objective. But I noticed that you didn't answer the question you asked yourself, which is the question. You run, so you recently broke the record for a 268-mile race, the Spine race, 268.
I broke the men's record, if I'm honest. I didn't break the women's. The women's record is okay. Better.
Okay.
But,
not good enough. Do better. Go faster.
Yeah.
And you ran 268 miles in what? How long did that take you?
Oh, it was 80-something hours. So kind of 3 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, kind of 3 days-ish.
Right. So
that's 4 days actually. Yeah, about 4 days.
4 days. So just for reference, that is running up and down mountains, an equivalent distance to over halfway from London to Edinburgh, which you did in about 3 and a bit days, 3 or 4 days.
I suppose so. They're more bogs. This is the Pennine Way, so it's more bogs than mountains if we're going to get sort of pedantic. Right. But you could say they're harder to run in because they kind of slow you down a bit. But
yes, you
that
could
kind
say
of
that,
thing.
Yes. So why?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much tried to write a book on the why. Well, sorry, I did write a book. I don't know if I answered it properly. It's hard to describe how wonderful these experiences are. I appreciate I haven't won you over totally yet. Yes, there can be some discomfort, a lot of tiredness involved. However, normally these occur in wonderful places, scenic places, I suppose, such as the Pennine Way or proper mountains. B, usually the people you meet are great, and there's a lot of camaraderie. It doesn't feel like a road race. Well, there's camaraderie at road races, don't get me wrong. I still enjoy road races sometimes, but there's much more of, I think, team spirit and sort of, I've made many friends for life in these. The guide father for my son was someone I met at one of these races. I've been to weddings, people I've met at these races. You just make great friends. There's great, I'd say most of these events have great atmosphere. There's lots of volunteers, almost like the more crazy the event. So we were referring a bit there to the Spine race. Almost the more crazy the event, the more it seems to attract people who sort of want to help / look. And I mean that in a positive way. They almost want to see what's it like? What are these people?
What the hell are these people? A bit like people stand by a motorway to see, look at a crash.
Hopefully, yeah. But let's not get too much into that one. But and I must, it's enormously rewarding when you do it. But afterwards, but also the process. You realise it's the process of doing it that is the rewarding thing, not necessarily the outcome so much. I like to think so. It's actually a wonderful experience. I mean, the classic thing. Hopefully, this will. I mean, running through the night and when dawn comes is always, absolutely always, a great moment. No matter how tired and fed up you are, the night can be fantastic. We can see stars and creatures and all sorts, and fresh frost on the ground. But actually, when you see the hint of hint of dawn on the horizon. That's always a great moment, and often that's shared with people, and you're in a stunning scenery. And I think it's often you're away from technology. It's often the simplicity as well of you've got several days without any beeps from your phone, and you're just trying to get from here to there. And our lives are, quite complicated, and we've made them quite stressful, perhaps. And a line I have used before is kind of, and I don't want to overplay this. This is in Western privilege sort of middle class lives anyway. Otherwise my life is pretty safe and pretty predictable. And it's almost like that I need a bit of a, not pain necessarily, but a little bit of a challenge or to run through adventure. The emotions of sort of doubt and adventure is a great word, but to feel some doubt. I wouldn't, probably not fear as such, but certainly vulnerability, things like that. It's actually pretty cool to do that. I do it sort of 2 to 4 times a year. I sign up for something I know I'll get this kind of roller coaster of emotions, get my fix of that. So I know it is still a niche sport, but it's massively growing, and I don't know if I've explained well why it might be.
No, you really have. And I love the idea of it. I love the idea of all of it. It's just, I'm not sure I could go that far because I'm not sure my mental game is up to it. And this is what I really want to, in fact, this is what this episode's about, right? Like, yes, I understand that you get to see the sun come up and you get to have loads of people giving you jam tarts. I understand that is a nice thing. But it must be really hard work, like to the point if I think about when I'm going for a run and it's really hard work, and then you're doing this up mountains for hundreds of miles. So where does your mental strength come from to endure, to keep going? Talk to me about that.
Well, I would say at first it doesn't have to be as hard as that sounds. Normally you've got a really sort of generous time to do that in, and when we say we're running, it's pretty slow. Like it's got to be a sustainable pace. We take those breaks, but yes, you've got to be, I think, mentally engaged in it. For quite a lot of these early ultra marathons, I was a journalist, and I would have been writing a story about it, and often I wouldn't get paid if I didn't succeed, or at least in my head I wouldn't have got paid. And sometimes there was a photographer as well, and it bothered me that maybe I didn't know if they would get paid if I didn't get to the end. So that's I guess a fairly unique sort of scenario, but that was quite motivating. But also I suppose I had a young daughter at the time, and it was almost like this is what motivate. Well, there are 2 things that really motivate me, but one would be my children, and at the time it was like I was away from my new daughter, felt a bit guilty about that sometimes. So it was almost kind of like almost make it worthwhile, like make sure you do this properly so that it counts for something. And that still motivates me quite a lot today, just thinking of my kids while I'm doing it. I mean, they're very disinterested and unimpressed. As I said before, with both their mother and they know I run 100 miles, but they're not particularly impressed. They just think that's normal. And I
take it you haven't taken them out for a go. You think this is so unimpressive, son?
They're too fast, especially my son. Actually, just last night we do a local a Corsham running club. It's called the 1 Mile Club, and he does need to learn a bit about pacing. But he's faster than me over the first probably 50 meters or so. Yeah, he leaves me for dead. Where was I? So it's become a bit of a cliche, but sports psychologists tell us we have to think of our why. So you have to know your why beforehand. And that could be all sorts of things, and that's going to be a personal thing. It's no point in me telling someone else what their why should be. But for me, I think of my kids. And then secondarily, nowadays, I think of sort of our climate and ecological emergency. Now, of course, an event, a running event, any sporting event will have contributed to some extent to that.
It's not
depends how
Formula
much
1,
into the weeds. Yeah, it's not Formula 1. Depends how far into the weeds you want to get, but it's not the greatest crime in the world, depending on the event and so on. But it's sometimes, over time, that has given me a small platform to be able to sort of mouth off about this stuff. Or if I do very well in the race, there's a moment at the finish line where, I might get interviewed. I might be able to wave a little flag around, or it just adds to hopefully my small platform where I can, I suppose, continue to go on about this stuff. So I tell myself that's my sort of double why or my other why. Whether that really, I don't really believe I'm the Bob Geldof of climate change, but like it at least in my mind, it gives me like a double why of sort of, right, you're doing this for that as well. So, so I think people just need to, well, firstly sign up for something that, excites you and frightens you, I think. And certainly I was doing that. And I think the more invested you are, almost the more frightened you are, that I'd almost say the more likely you are to actually get to the end. I coach, I really am rambling here, but I coach runners now. That's my main income. And usually if they don't complete a race, it's usually because they just didn't care that much about that particular race. So, know your why, I suppose.
What I took from that is Damian's bit of advice is you're not going to endure at anything unless you are clear why you're doing it and have that sort of clear thing. And presumably the more sort of galvanizing for you that why is, the better. But there's still some people must be more likely to quit than others. So what about, like, are there tips and tricks for the kind of mental game, for kind of how you, and other things you've had to learn that maybe, as you've toughened your game as you've gone on? How do you actually in practice keep yourself going over that hump?
Well, I think I wish I'd knew this earlier on. Low mood, eat food, because we need so many more calories, and 20% of those calories go to our brain. So if we're underfueled, we don't make such good decisions, and we're not as motivated. So, and it is hard if you're not used to it. You have to eat something every hour, maybe even every half hour, a little something going in. So I'd say that's that's number one. The next one is really, quite universal, but really effective, which is kind of chunking it is one phrase, or breaking it up into little chunks.
Oh, that's what you mean. I thought you meant the thing I'm at risk of doing in a half marathon this weekend.
That can happen too. But so you don't think I've got 200 miles to go, because that can put a downer on things. So you think I've got 5 miles to go to the next checkpoint, and I'm going to have some pineapple pizza there. Sorry, that's a controversial one, isn't it? Some nice pizza with or without pineapple. So you break it up into the little the chunks, the manageable chunks, whatever seems. It might even be just 1 mile, or just, am I all right just now? Well, let's keep going. They're two really useful, practical things. Another mantra I've learned over time is it never always gets worse, which I quite like. So there is an element of kind of coming back to life quite a few times, and I quite like that. So you might feel awful, and then you revive, and sometimes that just happens, and sometimes you can sort of force that through, usually by eating more or drinking.
That's the bit that comes with experience then, I guess, is that, like, the more you do this stuff, the more you realise, A, you will get to the end one way or the other, and B, at your lowest point, that is your lowest point. It can get better.
It definitely doesn't sort of carry on getting lower and lower. So often it comes back around, and there might be another low point ahead, but you'll come out of that too as well. So it's actually quite exciting when you've done that a few times, and different strategies to do it.
And have you ever had a moment where you have just hit the bottom and you've had to stop, or have you always just managed to kind of keep on trudging on?
No, I have stopped. It was 9 years before I first kind of did what we call a DNF, or did not finish. And I've done that in technically 3 races. One was the Barkley marathons. I don't know if that really counts. I like to claim it didn't really count as a DNF, but technically it does. The other two
just for listeners, the Barkley marathons is it was legendarily impossible ultra run, isn't it? It's like if it's deliberately designed to be just about impossible to finish, if I understand it right.
The best way to sum it up is since I think it's 1986 it started. There have been 17 people have finished it in well over 30 years, and I didn't finish it either. The other my sort of 2 real DNFs One was a physical thing where I had a physical injury. It was the spine race, which I've done a few times. And I really did want to carry on. I was winning the race by 4 hours. It was even a sunny day in January on the Pennine Way. I just made the decision that physically that was not going to be enjoyable or sensible. For the long run, I had a sharp pain in my groin. My groin had let me down, not for the first time in my life. But the other main DNF was at UTMB, my fifth run at UTMB, which probably was significant. It probably was significant as my fifth time there, in that I guess on reflection, I didn't have a great why, because I'd done it 4 times and I'd probably had my best run there. And then I definitely did get underfueled. I definitely didn't feel motivated, but I'm still a bit frustrated and baffled by that one, because that was something I'd prided myself previously on, I guess, on my fueling and my mental strength. But at that moment, or for those few hours, you could not have convinced me to carry on, even though I didn't really have a good reason to stop, but I just did not want to go on. So that was that was going to happen at some point, and it's quite helpful to know that can fairly easily happen, actually. So I think my why wasn't really strong enough.
So there you are, listeners. Even the legendary Damian Hall, looks back on moments of bailing out and considers himself to be a pathetic,
massive quitter.
Waste of time, massive quitter. So it's all right if you feel like that as well, because even Damian does. Well, I suppose, question then, like, in the rest of your life, are you a chap who endures? Are you pretty good at sticking with stuff? Or is it just a thing you can do in running because people give you jam?
That's a question. I'm definitely not. So I definitely I know people who I suppose who are perfectionists. If you look at my GCSE results and A-level results, you will know I'm not a perfectionist. In fact, I failed A-level media studies, and then which is kind of crazy.
I didn't realise you could do that.
Yeah. And the irony was I then got a job in the media. But that was probably partly why, might have been why. And I'm not, I don't think I'm a high achiever in other areas. But your question was more about enduring things. Now, it's quite interesting. Both me and my sister both got summer jobs at different times in this pie factory near where we lived in Nailsworth in the Cotswolds. She quit after one day because it was shit. And I did 2 summers. There, working there. It's sort of, I don't want to mock it, because that was, some people that was their full-time job, but it was not, it was not good pay and it was not a good place to work. But I stuck, I put up with it for 2 summers, and she was just like, no. So I don't know who, she's always been much better at going, no, that's not for me, I'm moving on to something else. And I've definitely stuck at things longer than I should have, whether that's some relationships or jobs or other situations. So I think if I look back, I do stick with things, but it's not always the right decision.
Which I suppose points to endurance is not necessarily always what you want to do, right? Like, if you've entered a race and you need to get to the end of the race, fine. But then you were giving an example earlier of when you could have carried on, but your knob might have fallen off, or whatever it was you said the problem was. So there might be times when actually you need to stop. And it's not necessarily universally true that just keeping on going is always the right thing to do, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're in an unhealthy situation if your job is not a good one for you and so on, I mean, quitting could actually be the braver thing, the better thing to do. So that's worth me thinking more about now that you've raised that up. In fact, I'm not enjoying this interview, so I'm not going to endure it. I'm going to quit.
I would like it put out to the world that if Damian quits ultra running tomorrow, it weren't my fault.
Your brain on climate.
So look, you are known, as well as being a man who runs up and down mountains, you are increasingly known as a climate warrior activist. You've set up a thing that I'm a member of, albeit not one you'll probably have noticed, called the Green Runners, which I want you to make sure you talk about. Tell me a bit about climate change, what it means to you, and what you're trying to do about it.
Well, Dave, thank you for joining the Green Runners. Of course I spotted your name. Cripes, that's quite a big one. I guess in about 2019, I saw Extinction Rebellion protests in London, which made the news and were really striking for lots of reasons. Were really amazing. It did make me think, oh, well, I know the polar bears are a bit in trouble, but is it really that urgent? And kind of like, am I really? Well, I suppose, yeah, I started looking into it, and then you really realize, oh, it's really much more urgent than the mainstream. And I hesitate to say this because it sounds conspiratorial, but, the mainstream media is owned by, right-wing billionaire sort of press barons, media barons, and they're not necessarily reporting what the scientists are screaming about. By
the way, I don't think that is a controversial statement.
Okay.
I think we can agree on those facts.
I've only just started having almost the courage to say that because I just worry that I sound almost like a flat earther or something like that. But yeah, I guess if you go on social media and find out, just find 5 or 6 of the key scientists and actually earlier today I was thinking I should maybe share more who I followed in case that interests other people. But I guess people like Michael Mann is one of the top guys in America, and the excellently named Katherine Hayhoe, she's Canadian, I believe. In America and in England, is it Ed Hawkins? He's very good, and there's lots of others. Once you've followed a few, you'll sort of where were we? Yeah, you learn it's much more urgent than governments and corporations and the media are saying, and that's pretty frightening actually. And then of course, I've got children, and you start to think, well, what are they going to think of us in when we sort of hand over to them? What are they going to think of our generation? We knew, we've got the ICC reports, which are watered down anyway, but still pretty startling. We've got the United Nations telling us to act now. And really when they're saying that, they're saying we must dramatically reduce fossil fuel consumption. Primarily, it's obviously not quite that simple, but that's the big one for now. And it's alarming. It's really upsetting. And that's why, there are protest groups like, Insulate Britain and especially Just Stop Oil are really sort of, they understand, they're trying to let us all know how urgent this is. And then around the same time, there was Dan Lawson, a fellow GB ultramarathon runner, and his wife Charlotte Jalley, and they formed a little organisation called Rerun Clothing, and they were telling us about the waste in running, the t-shirt waste, the trainer waste. And then that made me think, well, hold on. I thought running was like you say, it's not Formula One, but actually it has some big problems. And it's very much past to say the fast fashion industry, which is globally is epic destruction, epic impact. And then I was sort of flying 3 times a year to races and, showing off my new kit from my sponsors on Instagram, and without really considering that was actually sort of part of this cycle of overconsumption that underpins so much of this. So I suppose I was woken up to pun intended, and around the similar time, my publisher of my first book, Kirsty Reid. The publisher is Vertebrate Publishing, but my editor is Kirsty Reid, and she sort of really encouraged me to explore whether there was a book in kind of, I don't know, climate breakdown and running, like how what parts of running were bad or good, and how much of it was part of the problem. So I got really into that, really sort of almost sort of tucked myself away for a year to really research that, and didn't really like most of what I found out there. It was mostly quite gloomy, although not entirely. So I think my book came out about a year ago, and then around that time, I already had a WhatsApp group of but me and Dan Lawson started a WhatsApp group of it reached about 50 runners. Just, I guess, climate-concerned runners. We're just trying to add anyone we could. And that became the Green Runners, who launched about a year and a half ago. And that's really taken off more than I could ever imagined. We've got over 1,000 members around the globe. We were just nominated for a BBC Green Sport Award. It's been incredibly exciting, and it feels very, I feel really grateful to everyone who's joined, yourself included, Dave. And I remember when you joined. It was a great day. Because it made it, I don't know, it made it feel like it was, we were doing the right thing or doing something. And that is, so we're, in a way, we're still trying to suss out exactly what the right things are. But even just forming a group, hey, look, some runners really care about this stuff. That's a gesture in itself. And I think we can still do a lot of things. But that's kind of been the journey, broadly speaking.
No, it's amazing. And you were sort of suggesting earlier as well that there's something about running itself, particularly the sort of running you do, that sort of gives you maybe an appreciation. Is that right? Is that the right way of looking at it? But maybe, I don't know, you spend a lot of time in the outside, right? So presumably have time to reflect on these things.
I don't think it's a coincidence that most of the group are sort of what you'd call fell or trail or ultra runners. They're probably, or almost all of them, given the choice, would go and run in the mountains or run in the hills or run in the woods. Not that we have anything against roads or track or anything like that. That's just where, it's probably not a coincidence that those people are noticing things or more aware of environmental issues. I must say, there's an amazing group who have supported us called Champions for Earth, and they're full of water sports. A lot of ex-Olympians, actually, and elite water sports athletes. And it's interesting that the water sports were ahead of us. I don't think we're ahead of the curve. We're kind of, I don't know, on the curve or everything's too late at the moment, to be honest. But we're ahead of, say, I don't know, it feels like triathlon or the road scene or cycling perhaps. But the water sport people were ahead, and which is interesting. And of course, they're in nature, they're in water, so that might not be a coincidence.
Do you think that there's something about running itself? Let's sort of get a bit philosophical for a second. That thing of, like, we've talked about endurance and about kind of keeping going and plodding up the mountains and thinking about your why. I mean, are there things that we can take from that to think about what we might all do about climate change? Are there metaphors you've drawn or lessons for broader life, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Because, if you take the whole thing and you think I'm just one little person and this whole global heating, climate breakdown issue, like, it just seems beyond insurmountable, if that even makes sense in English. But just too big to comprehend. I suppose, like running 1,000 miles or something like that just doesn't seem possible. But then you chunk it down, to use your favorite phrase. And I suppose you kind of think, okay, what can I do as an individual, or almost what can I do this week, or is there something I can do today? And then it can become more manageable, more realistic. I think that's a great approach. Actually, I think that's very similar. And also, I suppose, we're not gonna defeat this big issue tomorrow. I suppose it's not like a park run or even a marathon. It probably is something of an ultra marathon, and we're heading for a DNF at the moment. It feels like, and we need to up the pace and eat jam. Eat jam. Okay, yeah.
Well, I think there is something, and I've talked before to people about this, about kind of not celebrating small wins in a way, right? Like, this stuff is difficult. The fight seems like it's only going in the wrong direction, but there are things out there you can look at and go, actually, that's all right. Things are going in the right way, and kind of allowing yourself not to be perpetually kind of slogging and glooming and going, occasionally it's all right to eat some jam, metaphorically speaking, right?
Yeah, and there's actually an approach in ultramarathons that I try and tell the athletes I coach, actually, which is kind of like, okay, something's going wrong. Like in your race, it might be you've got a blister already. You weren't expecting a blister, or I don't know, you've gone off all your gels, or you're an hour or two off the pace you're hoping for. So something's going wrong in your race. But actually, these races are sort of multifaceted. So actually, okay, say you're 2 hours behind your schedule, but actually you're fueling quite well, you're uninjured, you've managed your kit quite well. The weather's not great, but you're doing okay, and you might come up with, I don't know, say there are 5 factors, and 4 of them are actually going all right, but it's sometimes. Does this really go over to climate change? I'm not sure, but it's sometimes you can get hung up on the one thing that's not working when some of the other things are working out. I'd almost kind of say I don't want to be too gloomy, but it feels sometimes like it's the other way around. Like there are 4 things that really need work, and there's at least one of them's going well. Like, but yeah, that approach I think might be useful as well. I am fascinated in the debate of sort of individual action versus collective action, or nudging for system change, and I do increasingly encourage people to aim more for that stuff than the sort of individual actionism, the sort of reducing your own emissions, which I think people, if they care, they're going to naturally do some of, but I don't think we should get too obsessed with that, because that's what the fossil fuel companies want us to obsess over, our own footprints rather than theirs, and theirs is the one.
There's something also that strikes me about perspective, generally about perspective, right? And a lot of what you were talking about earlier about how you keep going up on them hills is about knowing that there are dips and there are good bits, and knowing that the race will end, and knowing that if you get from here to here and here. And I think one of the biggest challenges we face, it seems to me, as people who want this all to work out right in the end, is signal from the noise. Is kind of, as we record a few weeks ago, Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland said a load of really unhelpful stuff and did a load of really unhelpful stuff about climate change. And obviously everyone around me in my world, probably in yours as well, was kind of going, it's awful, it's terrible. And don't get me wrong, there's bad stuff in there, right? But it's kind of trying to force yourself to be able to go, in the long run, how significant is this? What are the things in here that really do matter? And it strikes me that it's a good thing to do for your own sort of perspective on things, but in general is the art at the moment, not freaking out at every small thing that goes wrong. You look at your watch on a run and you might be a little bit behind schedule. Well, that's all right if you've got a plan. And so does this rambling nonsense mean anything to you at all? Am I saying anything remotely interesting?
No, that does make sense. I'd almost call that, like almost the zooming out thing where, so we're in the race and we're behind schedule, but you zoom out and go, hold on, well, I'm healthy. I could afford to do this race as well. I feel grateful to my family, perhaps, that I could get this weekend away. But I've trained well. I'm fit. I'm healthy. Lots of people couldn't do this race for lots of reasons. Have this little adventure. And when you think like that, actually, it can almost seem a little bit selfish. But I still think we should all get out in the hills and bash ourselves up a bit every now and then. I think zooming out can really help. And then the example you gave, it's like, well, actually, hopefully that lot aren't in power for too much longer. And what was interesting, we could get the details of it, but some of the car manufacturers, who I'm not usually a fan of, actually responded by kind of saying, well, actually, we're going to sort of carry on because it was pointless you delaying it for 5 years, or that didn't help us. And then you zoom out more globally, and actually quite a lot of the key governments at the moment have gone to slightly, to more green focused governments than it was 2 or 3 years ago, which was a horrifying situation. You can zoom. I think zooming out is a clever thing sometimes.
Fantastic. Damian, thank you so much for coming on Your Brain on Climate. So how can people follow you, find out more about you? And if they want to get into ultra running, how can you help them with that? Oh, yes. I think I'm on most of the. I'm not on TikTok yet. I don't know. Let me know if you think I should be. But yeah, mostly. You're asking the wrong person. I'm barely on Instagram on this thing.
Well, Instagram probably is my favourite one. I think I'm just ultra_Damo on there. I'm on most of the others. With different degrees of enthusiasm, but yes, there's one other scheme. Thanks for bringing that up. That I've been involved in, called Into Ultra, and it is trying to make ultra running more accessible because there are some costs. Some events are expensive, some aren't, and there are runs you can just do that aren't events, but the equipment as well can be expensive. So I'm very lucky to be involved with a little group who there's a bit of a fund. And also lots of organisations and people have joined us to say we'll offer services for free or well discounted. So if people feel that ultra running isn't affordable to them, by all means go to, it's just intoultra.org. By all means go there, send us an email, tell us about yourself, and let's see if we can help. That's I think we've helped around 40 people so far. So I think ultra running could be more accessible. It is mostly boring prats like me, middle-aged white males, middle class. But it is changing. It is changing, thankfully. But it'd be nice to have more of a mix of people.
So that was the wonderful Damian. Check out his stuff. Consider joining the Green Runners if you're a runner. Just consider going out for a run if you're not. It is, I can vouch, incredibly good for one's connection with the world and stuff. And look, here's a thing that I don't normally do. I've snipped off a little bit of the end of that interview, and I'm going to put it into a dedicated bit for my Patreon subscribers. I'll probably put it out for everyone else in a bit. We talked for a few minutes about what people can do in their own lives about stuff, and it was a little bit off topic for the interview. I wanted to keep it a bit punchy, so I chopped it out, but I thought you might like it. And there's a really funny story about it, which I will tell Patreon subscribers. But to cut a bit of a long story short, it turned out that Damian had kind of come across me before and hadn't realised it. Just a reminder, if you like the show, if you want to chuck in a couple of quid to support genuinely independent podcasting, this is just me in my room doing this by myself, me and Maggie Cat, and that is it. You can go to wobblywobblywobbly.patreon.com/yourbrainonclimate, and or please leave me a review on your podcast medium of choice. You can get in touch with me. You can email hello@yourbrainonclimate. Tell me someone you'd like me to have on, make some introductions, wonderful stuff. And you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever the bloody hell it's called now, @Brain Climate. I need to get better at using it. Too much else going on. If you want to do that for free, hey, that'd be a way you could help. Get in touch and tell me you can run my socials for me in exchange for love and, kisses and stuff. Okay, that's all from me for this month. Thank you again to Damian. Thank you to you. You are wonderful. Get out and get up that hill, you lazy so-and-sos. Okay, bye.